The silent Erasure Captain Sarah Chen watched Earth die from her command station 300 kilometers above the surface. The Catharian Empire had come not with fanfare or declaration, but with the cold efficiency of exterminators dealing with an infestation. No warnings, no negotiations, no mercy. The first wave struck the major population centers. New Shanghai vanished in a flash of purple light that left nothing but glass where 20 million people had lived and breathed just moments before. London followed, then Mumbai, then São Paulo. Each city erased with surgical precision, leaving perfect circular craters that reflected the morning sun like mirrors of death. Sarah's hands trembled as she gripped the command console of Orbital Defense Station Prometheus. Around her, the crew of 43 moved with the desperate efficiency of people who knew they were witnessing the end of everything they had ever known. Lieutenant Torres, barely 25 and fresh from the academy, was sobbing as she tracked the energy signatures blooming across Earth's surface like deadly flowers. "Captain, they're not stopping," Torres whispered, her voice breaking. "They're hitting every settlement, every outpost, every research station, even the Antarctic colonies." Sarah forced herself to remain steady. She had trained for this moment, though she had never believed it would come. Humanity had been so careful, so diplomatic. They had stayed within their designated sector, followed galactic law, paid their tribute to the Catharian Empire without complaint. They had been model subjects of the galactic community. None of it mattered now. The Catharian fleet hung in space like black daggers against the stars. 47 vessels, each one the size of a small city, each one capable of rendering a planet uninhabitable within hours. Sarah had studied their specifications during her years at the military academy. She knew their capabilities, their ruthless efficiency, their complete lack of what humans called mercy. "They're targeting the orbital platforms now," reported Commander Walsh from the tactical station. His weathered face was pale, but his voice remained steady. "Looks like they want to make sure nothing escapes." Sarah's mind raced through possibilities. The defense station had weapons, but they were designed to handle pirates and smugglers. Not a full Catharian extermination fleet. Running was their only option, but where could they go? The Catharians controlled half the galaxy, and their allied species controlled most of the rest. That's when the message came through. It wasn't transmitted through normal channels. It didn't come from Earth's surface or from any human vessel. It seemed to emerge from the station's computers themselves, scrolling across every screen simultaneously in letters that pulsed with an inner light. "The beacon awakens. Children of Earth, remember what you were before you reached for the stars. The old paths remain. Follow the song in your blood." "What the hell is that?" Torres asked, her voice high with hysteria. Before Sarah could answer, alarms began blaring throughout the station. But these weren't the familiar warning tones they all knew. This sound was different, older somehow. It resonated in their bones, awakening something primal that had been sleeping in the depths of human consciousness for millennia. Sarah felt it first, a tingling in her spine, a whisper in her mind that spoke without words. Her vision sharpened. Her hearing became acute. For a moment, she could smell the fierce sweat of her crew, could hear their heartbeats, could sense the emotional state of every person on the station with startling clarity. "Captain," Walsh said slowly, and Sarah realized he was feeling it too. "Something's happening to us." On the screens, Earth continued to burn. But deep beneath the Himalayan range, something that had been buried for over 100,000 years was finally responding to humanity's greatest need. The beacon had been waiting, patient as stone, for the moment when the children of Earth would need to remember their true nature. The Catherians had made a critical error in their intelligence gathering. They had studied human civilization, human technology, human politics, and culture. They had concluded that humans were simply another species of clever tool users, no different from the dozens of other races they had conquered or eliminated over the centuries. They had never studied what humans had been before civilization. They had no records of the apex predators that had once ruled Earth's food chain through cunning, pack coordination, and an intuitive understanding of violence that bordered on the supernatural. Those instincts had been buried under thousands of years of social development, but they had never truly disappeared. Now, with their home world burning and nowhere left to run, those ancient survival mechanisms were awakening. Sarah felt her tactical awareness expanding beyond anything she had experienced in decades of military service. She could sense the Catherian ships in space not as dots on a screen, but as living threats to be analyzed and countered. Her crew was no longer just a collection of individuals following orders. They had become something else, something coordinated and purposeful that moved with the fluid efficiency of a hunting pack. "Evacuate the civilian quarters," she ordered, and was surprised by the calm authority in her voice. "All non-essential personnel to the escape pods. Set course for the research vessel Endurance. It has the longest range of any ship in the fleet." "Captain, the Endurance can only hold 500 people," Walsh pointed out. "There are over 3,000 humans in the orbital stations." Sarah closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of impossible choices. When she opened them again, something had changed. The woman who had spent her career following regulations and protecting civilian lives was still there, but she was no longer alone in her own mind. Something older and more pragmatic had awakened to share the burden. "Then we save 500, she said simply, "and we make sure those 500 carry everything forward." The evacuation began with desperate efficiency. The beacon's influence was spreading, awakening dormant capabilities in every human it touched. Engineers worked with impossible speed and precision. Pilots navigated through debris fields with reflexes that defied their training. Scientists gathered critical data and equipment with an intuitive understanding of what would be needed for long-term survival. Dr. Marcus Webb was among the last to board the Endurance. The elderly xenobiologist moved slowly due to his age, but his mind was racing with implications of what he was experiencing. As the beacon's influence reached him, he felt decades of research crystallizing into sudden, startling insights about human evolution and consciousness. "The neural pathways are still there," he muttered to himself as he settled into his assigned quarters. "Dormant but intact. We never lost our predatory instincts. We just learned to suppress them." The Endurance launched just as the Catherian fleet began targeting the remaining orbital installations. Sarah watched from the bridge as Prometheus Station died in a ball of superheated plasma, taking Commander Walsh and 24 others who had volunteered to buy time for the evacuation. But she didn't mourn. Not yet. The part of her mind that remembered how to hunt knew that grief was a luxury that could wait until the pack was safe. "Plot a course for the Void Sector," she ordered. "Maximum acceleration." The Void Sector was a region of space avoided by most galactic civilizations. It was full of dead systems, failed stars, and navigational hazards that made travel dangerous and unprofitable. It was exactly the kind of place where survivors could disappear while they figured out what to do next. As Earth fell behind them, now nothing but a cooling ball of rock and ash, the 500 survivors of humanity began to change. The beacon's influence grew stronger with distance, as if Earth's destruction had removed some barrier that had been containing it. They were becoming something new, something that the galaxy had never seen before. They were becoming what humans had been before they learned to be civilized. The awakening in the dark 5 years had passed since Earth's death, and the survivors had learned to call the darkness home. The Endurance drifted through the void sector like a ghost ship, its hull scarred by asteroid impacts and its systems, running on salvaged parts and desperate ingenuity. But the crew was no longer the same collection of frightened refugees who had fled the burning homeworld. They had become something else entirely. Dr. Marcus Webb documented the changes with the methodical precision of a man who understood he was witnessing the birth of a new stage in human evolution. His laboratory aboard the Endurance had become a shrine to transformation, filled with brain scans, genetic analyses, and behavioral studies that painted a picture of humanity's metamorphosis. The neural restructuring is accelerating, he reported to Captain Chen during their weekly briefing. At 68, Webb moved with the fluid grace of a much younger man. The beacon's influence had not only awakened dormant capabilities, but had somehow optimized human physiology in ways that defied conventional understanding. Sarah studied the data on her tablet, though she hardly needed to read the technical specifications. She could feel the changes in herself and in every member of the crew. Her senses had sharpened to the point where she could identify individuals by scent from across the ship. Her reaction time had improved by orders of magnitude. Most remarkably, she had developed an almost supernatural ability to predict the actions and intentions of others. "Show me the latest test results," she said. Webb activated a holographic display that showed brain activity patterns of the Endurance crew compared to baseline human measurements from before Earth's destruction. The differences were startling. Regions of the brain associated with spatial awareness, pattern recognition, and predatory behavior were showing activity levels that should have been impossible for baseline humans to achieve. "We're not becoming something new," Webb explained. "We're becoming something old, something that our ancestors were before agriculture, before cities, before we learned to suppress our hunting instincts in favor of cooperation." Sarah nodded, though part of her mind was already processing information that had nothing to do with Webb's scientific explanations. Through the ship's hull, she could sense the approach of 3 vessels. Her crew was already responding to the threat before the sensors even registered the incoming ships. It was a coordination that transcended normal communication, a pack awareness that allowed the survivors to function as a single organism when threatened. "We have company," she said quietly. Moments later, Lieutenant Torres confirmed her intuition. From the bridge, 3 ships approaching from the asteroid field. Configuration suggests Catharian patrol vessels. The crew moved to battle stations with liquid efficiency. But this was not the panicked scramble of refugees running from superior firepower. This was the calculated positioning of predators preparing to demonstrate why they had once ruled their homeworld's food chain. The Catharian ships were sleek, advanced, and heavily armed. By every conventional measure, they should have been able to destroy the Endurance without difficulty. But conventional measures no longer applied to human survivors who had learned to think with the collective intelligence of a hunting pack. Sarah felt the tactical awareness of her entire crew flowing through her consciousness. She knew without looking that engineering had identified 17 critical vulnerabilities in the enemy ship's designs. She knew that weapons had calculated firing solutions that would exploit those weaknesses with mathematical precision. She knew that navigation had already plotted escape routes through the asteroid field that would be impossible for non-human pilots to follow. Most importantly, she knew that her crew was ready to kill without hesitation, mercy, or regret. The lead Cytherian vessel transmitted a standard surrender demand. Sarah responded by ordering the Endurance to accelerate directly toward the enemy formation. To outside observers, it would have looked like a suicide charge. The Cytherians probably assumed they were dealing with desperate refugees making a final, hopeless gesture of defiance. They were wrong. The attack began with surgical precision. The Endurance's outdated weapon systems somehow found gaps in enemy shielding that shouldn't have existed. Targeting systems that had been designed for mining operations achieved accuracy rates that defied their technical specifications. Most remarkably, the human crew seemed to anticipate Cytherian tactics before they were implemented, responding to threats that their sensors hadn't yet detected. The battle lasted exactly 4 minutes and 37 seconds. When it ended, 3 Cytherian patrol vessels had been reduced to expanding clouds of debris, and the Endurance had suffered only minor hull damage. "Impossible," muttered Torres. From her station, "The tactical computers are showing casualty ratios that can't be accurate." But Sarah knew they were accurate. She had felt each enemy ship die, had sensed the moment when Cytherian crew members realized they were not facing civilized opponents bound by the rules of conventional warfare. They had encountered something older and more dangerous than anything. In their military databases, Dr. Webb reviewed the battle recordings with growing excitement. "The coordination levels are off the charts," he reported. "We're operating as a collective consciousness while maintaining individual identity. It's as if the beacon awakened some form of distributed intelligence that allows us to function as both individuals and as components of a larger organism." That night, Sarah dreamed of running through endless forests under alien stars. In her dream, she was not alone. Thousands of humans moved through the darkness beside her, their footsteps silent on the forest floor, their eyes reflecting starlight, as they hunted prey that had never learned to fear the children of Earth. When she woke, Sarah realized the dream had not been hers alone. Across the ship, 500 survivors had shared the same vision of humanity's future. They had seen themselves not as refugees or victims, but as the galaxy's newest apex predators. The transformation was accelerating. Reports began filtering in from across the void sector. Other human survivors, scattered across a dozen different hiding places, were experiencing similar changes. Mining crews who had been stranded when Earth fell were reporting enhanced abilities and pack-like coordination. Research expeditions that had been exploring the galaxy's rim were developing tactical capabilities that allowed them to evade or destroy Cytherian patrols with impunity. Most remarkably, the survivors were beginning to find each other. Without communication, equipment, or navigational aids, scattered groups of humans were somehow converging on common locations. They were following instincts that predated civilization, tracking each other through space with the same supernatural awareness their ancestors had used to find game in trackless wilderness. The Cytherian Empire began to take notice. Reports of anomalous human behavior started appearing in their military briefings. Patrol vessels that had been sent to eliminate human survivor groups were disappearing without sending distress calls. Outposts that had been built to monitor human refugee movements were going silent in the night, for the first time since beginning their extermination campaign. The Cytherians were beginning to feel something they had not experienced in centuries of conquest. Fear Emperor HFY received the reports in his crystalline palace on the Cytherian homeworld. The tall, ethereal being had ruled the empire for over 300 years, presiding over the conquest or elimination of 47 different species. None had ever presented him with a challenge once their homeworlds had been destroyed. The humans were different. "Explain to me," he commanded his military advisors, "how a species we rendered extinct 5 years ago is now destroying our patrol fleets." General Kithok, the Empire's most experienced military commander, projected tactical displays that showed human attack patterns across 12 different sectors. "They are not fighting like any species we have encountered, my Emperor. They seem to share information instantaneously across vast distances. They coordinate attacks without using detectable communication methods. Most disturbingly, they appear to be learning and adapting at a rate that defies conventional intelligence assessments." Emperor Vexhai studied the data with growing unease. The Catherian Empire had built its power through superior technology and ruthless efficiency. They conquered by identifying and exploiting the weaknesses of other species. But the human survivors seemed to have no exploitable weaknesses. If anything, they were becoming more dangerous as time passed. "What do our xenobiologists conclude about these changes?" the Emperor asked. "That is where the reports become troubling, my Emperor. Our scientists believe the humans are undergoing some form of evolutionary acceleration. They are developing capabilities that did not exist when we initially studied their species. It is as if the destruction of their homeworld triggered some form of genetic activation that is transforming them into something entirely new." The Emperor's crystalline features darkened, or something very old. Aboard the Endurance, Sarah Chen felt the moment when the Catherian Emperor first spoke her species' name with fear in his voice. She didn't understand how she knew this, just as she didn't understand how she could sense the locations of other human survivor groups across hundreds of light years of space. But she accepted the knowledge with the same calm certainty with which she accepted her enhanced reflexes and predatory instincts. The hunt was beginning. The galaxy had forgotten what humans were before they reached for the stars. Now, scattered among the void and driven by necessity, humanity was remembering. They were becoming what they had always been beneath the veneer of civilization, the most dangerous predators ever to emerge from the darkness between worlds. Asterisk.